Hey guys, welcome back. So today we have a couple of folks here in studio with us. We have Jason again, and then we also have Pad. And we are going to tackle the subject of the AK and all of its variations and compare it probably to the M16 and perhaps some other Western rifles. And this will probably be a heated discussion, and I'm sure a lot of you are going to have some pretty strong opinions. Please post them down below. And it's going to be interesting to hear what you guys have to say. With that being said, this is something that I'm a little bit apprehensive to jump into because I know how strongly people feel about AKs, how strongly people feel about ARs. People just feel strongly in general about whatever choice it is they buy, car, gun, tennis shoes, whatever. People have strong opinions.
Glock is the only handgun.
Glock, the brick.
You're not wrong.
No,
the Glock was all the rage in the 90s.
Has changed now. Now you listen. No, I'm just kidding.
Boy, if you love 1990s music, you got to carry a Glock. All right, so let's jump into this AK thing because wow. So guys, if you've been living under a rock, you may not have realized that Russia has attacked one of its neighbors, Ukraine, and we're getting a lot of information coming out of Ukraine with regards to Russian weapon systems and how well they're working, or shall I say how they're not working. Everything from their non-existent body armor to their fake reactive armor on their tanks to their weapon systems. I'm seeing a lot of images and video coming out of Ukraine with Russian soldiers running around with AKM-74s, and they're actually using iron sights in 2022. The weapons have no lights, no laser designators, nothing on them.
Aren't they not fighting at night because of...
Yeah, there were early reports that the Russian soldiers would initiate early morning attacks, and then by nightfall they would dig in and hold their ground because they're rocking iron sights, right? But now we're starting to see the Russians commit more, I guess, better trained forces, higher level forces to the fight. They're bringing in T-90 tanks now, which are getting decimated by our weapons that we're supplying to Ukraine, but we're starting to see them bring in higher end weapon systems. We're starting to see AK-12s. I guess AK-12s are quite the war trophy for Ukrainian soldiers. We're seeing Ukrainian soldiers picking them up off, Russian soldiers, kind of like our troops did with Lugers during World War II, taking them off dead Nazis. But I still think the vast majority of the Russian troops are rocking those AK-74s, and they're outgunned. Now, keep in mind, the Ukrainians are also running primarily AK-74s because they're a former comm bloc country. They were part of the Soviet Union. They manufactured a lot of the Soviet Union's stuff. And so it would only stand to reason they'd have a large number of them, but they've adopted other weapon systems. I believe they have adopted the X-95 or the Tavor. We've seen some images of that.
Seen some Tavors out there, yeah.
And so
they're a little bullpup thing, which I think is an AK variant of some kind.
They were in the process of updating their weapon systems to Western weapon systems before the war broke out because they've been wanting to apply for NATO status for some time, which presumably is why Putin invaded. So anyway, with that being said, the AK, who wants to go first? Because I'm going to kind of listen to what you guys have to say, then I'll kind of chime in.
Short video, it's obsolete. So
Even shorter video.
Yeah, short video. All right, guys, thanks for watching. No, the AK is one of those things that I played with them for many years, right? I even had a time where I was trying to, buy and collect them all. Milled receiver, stamp receiver, Polytech, Arsenal, Norinco, just all this. You could go
Bulgarian, Romanian,
every
Albanian
direction that you could go with AKs, right? There's so many. Got to collect them all, so. But the funny thing about the AK, and I do this all the time, is they are very hard to modify. Even in the beginning times, there was like almost no manufacturers making parts for the things to kind of tune them up or modernize them, if you will, right? Like lights, lasers, rails, all this stuff. Some of them was always just running just the basic iron sights on them. That's it. There was no optics rail on the side. Then you would get the optics rail on the side there, and then you had companies making, rails that would clamp onto there and then, maybe hold some zero, but then the optic was kind of shifted off center there, right? And then you had companies make it so you could slide it over center, but then when you look down there, you could see your front sights like leaning this way and your red dot's over here, and that kind of throws you off, So anyway, now with the AK and AR-15, M16, you look at an AR-15, there's an actual standardization, a mil spec or something of that nature, right? Most of the time, you can take an AR-15, M16 and pull the barrel off of this and put it in this one without any issue. Handguard, pistol grip, stock, buffer tube, whatever you want. You can interchange this stuff, right? The AK, maybe not so much.
Can you, when you're changing your AR-15, can you do it at home on like a standard workbench, or do you need to take it to like a gunsmith?
You can literally right at home. You get the right tools. There's probably a mag pull wrench, maybe a punch set.
And a nice,
you know what I mean?
Maybe a torque wrench.
Some nice tunes. Yeah,
there's some cool tools to make it easier to put in
cool
pins and stuff.
But in all honesty, it's much simpler. Where the AK, the idea that people think they can just be made in a cave, it's like.
Oh, I want to say this, though, because I love the folks that come in and say, I built my own AR-15. It's like, wow, you got a CNC machine? No, you didn't. You assembled it from a box of parts.
Right.
Anybody can do that. When people come in and say they built their own AK, that means they have a box and pan brake or something. They folded the receiver. They mashed their own rivets. Mm-hmm. They had to press a barrel into into a trunnion. There's actual work involved with making the AK. If you truly made an AK.
Yeah.
So the difference between those two groups are pretty funny, because I always love the AR builders. I built my AR-15. It's like, no, you didn't. You just ordered a bunch of parts and put it together.
Right.
So
right. And that's the cool thing about the AR-15.
Absolutely cool. It's a benefit. That's a positive, but it's just something funny I find in the community.
Right. So you got the AK, right, and 7.62 by 39 and 5.45 by 39 and the end.
Right. No, man, there's 6.5 Grendel. Vepers came in. There's 10 of them in country.
Grendel,
and,
right? So you had the Vepr, right? The nice commercially produced
with its 10-round magazine.
Right? 30-06, 243, 54R, 6.5 Grendel, 5.45, 223, all this stuff, right? And again, you were in this basic platform. Then you had companies that made the little clamps that would clamp on, because you had to cut handguard retainers. Oh wait, that's right. I wanted to put a handguard on there. I have to take apart the barrel. Oh, okay, I got to push a pin out. Oh man, I got to press this barrel out. I've got to do. There is a whole lot to do to put like a classic AK handguard on a Vepr. Well, then later on, they had the square, RPK
screw-on
style. Thing. Yeah, they had the screw-on little clamps that you clamp onto the barrel and then put some handguards on there. And then you had the newer Veprs come in that had the RPK style handguards on there. Well, now you can't use like AKM handguards on there. You need RPK handguards on there. Right? You see what I'm saying with this? Like, to source the parts on so many different AKs, you have to know Yugo AKs are different from the
Russian
AKs, Bulgarian AKs, all that stuff. Milled receiver, the butt stock is different than the stamped receiver, and the handguard, because the milled receiver's thicker.
Slant cut Chinese rear trunnions versus straight cut.
So you see where we're going with this, right? Like, there's a whole bunch of AK variants out there, and
but
it's hard to modify.
It's the best rifle platform, but.
Yeah. So. I love watching some of the in-range videos out there. Great guys, right? The mud tests. I love even the freeze test that we did on an AK. Good. They do stop.
Oh, I can take a pinch of stand and stop an AK.
That's what I'm saying. You could
I can do that to most
any gun. Yeah. But it is not this perfect system. It is not this, it will go through anything system.
I found one buried for 50 years, and I kicked the bolt open with the boot and, went and fought 10 battles. I know. The gun does lend itself more to abuse and neglect. Mm-hmm. Remember the underfolder Romanian I left in the back of the Polaris it's covered in rust now, but thing still works. I did have an AR-15. Actually, it was my M16 then. I'd fired some Wolf ammunition, and the Russians will just, come to work drunk one day, and it's like, hey, Vlad, we have some corrosive primers over there. Yeah, let's give it to the Americans, and they'll load it into their 223. Next thing you know, your Wolf ammo that's non-corrosive is highly corrosive, and it caused my bolt and carrier to rust to the point where I couldn't open the action. Try getting an M16 bolt out that won't cam.
Right. Tolerances are definitely tighter on the AR-15 M16.
The AK, I can just take a rubber mallet to that charging handle and beat the darn thing open. So there is a certain truth to the AK's simplicity, shall we say, right? It is a very simple
crude
weapon,
tolerances and that.
Perhaps to the point of fault, shall I say.
When the poor construction allows you to get it apart.
Right. Hey, my thing, some fitting required on the AK. But it's kind of one of those things that, now as we've progressed in time, it's 2022 here, right? You look at an AK on the wall, and you look at there's many manufacturers out there making accessories now for them. And what's that nice fine print? Some modification required, some fitting required, some filing required, some grinding required. So with an AK, in my opinion, your best tool for that gun is a Dremel. You can add anything you want to it with a Dremel tool. You're going to spend some time hand fitting stuff on them. And so with the AR-15, I can go buy a Geisley rail right out of the box, pop my barrel nut off, pop that on, and shink, right on there.
Do you need a gunsmith for that?
No, you can do that right at home with very simple tools.
YouTube is your friend.
Right. Whereas doing certain handguards on an AK, you've got different methods of doing it. Most of them generally clamp to the barrel.
I think the general most common tool used in AK modification is the Dremel followed up by a hammer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, enough dremeling and hammering, it'll fit.
It'll fit. Yeah, I've beat some parts onto AKs that just simply were being stubborn, But people also do goofy stuff. Like one of the dumbest things I've ever seen, it drives me nuts when I see it on an AK, is the railed gas tube.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, remember the tests we did 8 years ago? I mean, it's like one of the first things I did on the Mac channel. So if you take a look at EOTech and Aimpoint, they say that their sights have an operational temperature high range of around 150, 160 degrees before you start to degrade the electronics in the sight. If you go up to 160, 170, 180 degrees in temperature on the sight, even though the sight's still working, you're degrading the electronics, right? You're taking your $800 sight and you're shortening its service life. You don't want to get your sights that hot. So the dumbest thing you can possibly do is put your red dot sight on the hottest part of the gun next to the barrel. Mm-hmm. And you see people running these stupid things on all sorts of AKs just because there's no place else to put a red dot sight. So they put it on the gas tube that's held in place by a friction fit with a lever in the back, and then it's just pushed up against the gas block in the front.
Yeah,
and it's just generating tons of heat. We went out one summer, and we were just running mag after mag. I think 5 or 6 mags in, my red dot sight was over 160 degrees.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it, the argument comes down to who's the shooter. Who's the shooter? I mean, commercially on the retail side, I don't think there's any argument that the two predominant front runners for the every person rifle are going to be the AK or the AR-15 or some variant therein. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at cell phones. You've got people who buy a smartphone and they buy an Apple because it's set up the easiest way possible for the easiest use. You can't change much. Apple gives you their version of an intuitive operating system, and you use Apple's operating system. Whereas somebody who wants to change and customize and have it their way would be less apt to buy an Apple phone, but more apt to buy like an Android phone where you can customize. It's a more user-friendly, open-source, modular operating system.
Oh, boy, you lost me there.
So
Android's garbage, iPhone all the way.
You also carry a 1911, though.
When you start getting... Actually, I'm carrying P365 XL, but that's not the point.
He does. He still totes that.
I love 1911
brick around.
Hey, man, it's a classic.
So it's
Two world wars.
Same thing with well, yeah, but
maybe three. The way things are going.
Anything's got a history, right? But the same thing, same thing with the user of the rifle. Do they want to just walk in it and pick up something and say, "Yep, original configuration is good. It's going to go bang every time I want it to. I don't need to make any changes. Iron sights are fine with me. Have an AK." But if you're like, if you're like me, where you want to be able to customize it because I've got these little hands, short arms, I want something that fits me a little bit better. It's not going to be the same setup on the rifle as something that you would put together in an AR-15. So I think the modularity of an AR-15 appeals more to people that like to tinker, mm-hmm. and I think the one and done finality of the construction of an AK lends itself better to people who are like, yep, that's good enough for me. Let's go.
2 points on that. So tinkering and the modularity and comparing it to a phone, your AR-15 isn't going to get a virus. Okay? So anyway.
Also true. I hope not.
iPhones don't get viruses. Anyway, the tinkering. I don't know if the draw to the AR-15 is necessarily the tinkering. I think the draw to the AR-15, it is just a better weapon system in general. It is more modular. There is a standard. Most manufacturers adhere to that standard, and you can customize it quite easily. And generally, even very affordably. I mean, there's a wide range. You can go super expensive or you can go very budget friendly.
Sure.
And you can set that weapon up, like you said, to your own personal needs.
Right.
But in the end, it comes down to ergonomics and shootability. I would take an AR-15 over an AK. Now, I messed with the AK-74 for a full year. I claimed it was my go-to rifle. I tried and tried and tried. And I did. I mastered the rifle. But I guarantee you, I put far more effort into mastering that AK-74 than I ever would have to put into mastering the AR-15. Yeah. The magazine changes are not intuitive. I don't care if you can do a push-up on your AK. That's silly. I'm not going to do push-ups on my AR-15. And chances are, even if I did, it would still work just fine. I need to try that out in a video sometime. But it's just the fact that the 2-point locking system, people say, well, it's more durable, it's better feeding, whatever. Have you ever seen an AK mag in slow motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of flopping around in there.
The 2-point locking system, all that does, and we've seen it countless times. It's happened to me where you go in for that fast mag change, you miss the toe in the front, the back end locks, now you got a seized magazine that you literally have to beat out of the gun.
Right.
You don't get that problem with the AR-15. You can insert the magazine upside down. It's still going to pull right back out. You can flip it over and put it back in right.
Right.
It doesn't seize. It doesn't cause the gun to go down.
Right.
So, I mean, I can see from the perspective, I do firmly believe that the AR-15 is a superior rifle to the AK, for any number of reasons. Cartridge availability, like what you were talking about earlier. I mean, you can get it at 450 Bushmaster, 6 ARC, 6.5.
Significantly larger in
Right.
the AR-15, M16 than it is
Right.
for the AK.
It is a very flexible design. Eugene Stoner was really, I don't know if he anticipated the modularity that would come from the flat top upper and various handguards that would come along down the road and stuff like that, and rail systems and things like that. If he did, that just adds to his genius. I already admire the guy a ton.
Right.
But Kalashnikov didn't think very far past, Conrad, put some blood grips on it, and then iron sights can go shoot and kill. Because today, that's exactly where they're still at in the Russian military. They've swapped wood for polymer, and they're still rocking iron sights. And the only thing they've ditched in 1974 was the 7.62 by 39. They went to the 5.45 by 39, but Americans are still married to the 7.62 by 39, which is an inferior cartridge. So, I mean, I've always been a fan of the AK-74. Nostalgic, cool, weapon of my enemy. I want to understand it. I want to use it. I've used them extensively. I love them, but there is no way on God's green earth that I would take that rifle over an AR, a Virtus, even my old Wyndham-made ACR I would take over that. I could think of any number of rifles I would take over an AK simply because the AK is just too limited in terms of what I can do to set it up for my use. And I still have that old rifle that has the Sunco or whatever magazine flare that was supposed to help with the magazine reload, so you wouldn't get the seized magazine. And I mean, I tried everything. I even had worked with the company to come up with that the QD mount on the right hand side of the receiver that fit underneath the pistol grip, so you could run QD slings on it and carry it nicely versus just over the neck like I used to do for decades. I tried, man. I tried. I wanted to make the AK work, but in the end, it's just too much effort, and there's just too many pitfalls in running it.
There is a lot more effort to an AK to get that thing fully customized, fully decked out, or I'd like to just even call it the alpha setup. That's like a term that's kind of went viral ever since Vickers' video of an alpha AK, the PEC laser and whatnot on there, and a red dot and all this stuff. Because if you look at, there's companies out there, I want to say like Texas Weapon System or something, made a rail dust cover on there.
And Parabellum Armament did too, and neither one of them worked
Gen 2,
right.
Gen 3, I don't know what generation they're on.
Probably 16, they still don't work.
Right, exactly. Like I have not had one hold 0.
Put anything heavier than an RMR on it, and it loses 0.
So then you've got the guys that'll argue, well, you can get Zenico or whatever from it. Well, can I? Anytime I've ever tried to get Zenico stuff, it's been very difficult to get, very expensive, requires massive amounts of fitting on there, and adds a whole lot of weight to that gun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I've never been a fan of the product line.
Where I can do modular systems on the AR-15 that are significantly lighter, more durable, and hold 0 on my lights, lasers, red dot scopes, and all this other stuff on there. So, and that was the other funny part, in terms of AKs, the stock length. Right, I think the Bulgarians came out with like a different stock length.
They did. They called it NATO.
Yeah, right. So you got a little. They were very short. They would work well with body armor and things of that nature, but the stock length on an AK is pretty short. AKM is very short.
Yeah, I still run my stocks fairly short. Like on a M4, I only pop it out 1 click, maybe 2.
But then you got the folks that in order to get particular stocks, you'd have to replace the rear trunnion. And then you had companies making things that would work around that rear trunnion, you know what I mean? To where you would have this M4 adapter tube or a pick rail or something back there. And they were always, they're still to this day kind of, janky.
Think about this. Given the cost of Russian AKs now because of the ban on their importation, think of all the Russian AKs out there that people cut the rear tang off of to put some stupid stock on it and just demolish the value of the gun.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
And don't get me wrong, I don't hate the AK. I think a true AK with the wood furniture on it and all that is a sexy
lovely.
gun.
Sexy.
Yeah,
They
Yeah,
really are.
They have an unmistakable aesthetic. I mean,
They do, and it is truly a sexy gun. It's just in 2022 to modernize that thing is considerably more expensive, considerably harder to do for the average person or anybody to do. To me, and you look at this war in Ukraine, and you just see the way these things are running. It's like stop fighting at night. I mean, I'd be wanting to kick their door in at night. You know what I mean? And wanting to do whatever needs to be done.
You mean you don't fight at night?
Yeah, well, I totally want to.
Never heard of such a
Because
thing.
Americans owned the night, right?
Exactly.
Until
So-
Biden left ISIS with billions of dollars.
There we go. Now we're cooking with gas. Here we go.
How
So-
funny that the Russians are now fighting with inferior weapons to ISIS.
I know, right?
How funny
Thanks,
that,
Joe Biden.
that we've come full circle. They left all their stuff for ISIS. ISIS came around, picked up the American AR, and
Now you see
now
tons
Russia
of
is
pictures.
behind. Now Russia
They've
is
taken
behind
their
the curve.
AKs and they're like, well, you look at them. They're using AKs. It's like, right, because that's what was left to them. They're going to use exactly what was left to them. Now that they got these brand new M4, M16s, whatever, that are ACOGs and lasers and all that, they're like,
Upgrade.
fuck that.
Well,
behind
because
them.
that's, and the reason we're kind of joking about that is because that's always been one of the arguments pro AK people will bring up. Well, look at the Afghanis. They've been using AKs for 50 years because they're so reliable. No, they've been using AKs for 50 years because the Soviets left millions of
That's
them
what's
behind,
there.
and that's what they
That's what's
had.
there.
You take a look at after Joe Biden got done rearming ISIS and the Taliban, what are they carrying? They couldn't hook those AKs fast enough. They're all rocking M16s and putting selfies on Instagram,
Yeah.
primarily Twitter.
Right.
Yeah.
So they've gotten a full-on upgrade. So we see that. We see that in NATO, right? The Estonians with their LMT, the Kiwi rifle in LMT. You see, and they got them really nicely kitted out, with the new modern PECs and all that stuff, and ACOGs and RMRs and all this cool stuff that they can put on there, and you can pop them off and pop them back on. They retain zero. All the modern mounts and things.
Meant to be used with nods.
Right.
Yeah.
And so.
And the troops can do that on their own
On
in
their
the
own.
field. So if they're outside the wire away from an armory, they don't need any kind of special support to do that to their rifle. Whereas if you want to, change your optic or you want to try and put nods on an AK, man, good luck. Good luck. You're going to do that in the back of a vehicle with red lights on while you're trying? Nah.
Yeah.
What's funny is the Russians are married to that rifle. Everybody's talking about this great AK-12. The AK-12 is an AK with the Texas Weapon Systems top cover on it. I mean, it's literally
essentially-
it's a
it's a
pick rail on top of the top cover. Whoa, holding me back. That's a
different
major
looking
step
gas
forward.
block, I
Not the
think.
AN-94 or anything like that. Let's we're just gonna Zynico out the AK and call it the AK-12.
I imagine there's a fair amount of nationalism.
Right.
behind
Well, they're
that,
proud
too.
of it.
Yeah,
I mean,
and justifiably so. How long
But
has
I
it
mean,
been in
where
service?
does pride, trump practicality and utility? Right? You would think you'd want your military to be armed with the best, most modern weapon system. The fact the Russians keep going back to the drawing board like us, I mean, we've seen some really cool weapon systems. Like the AN-94 is one of those rifles that I really wanted to see. It uses a pulley to counterbalance recoil forces with a counterweight and stuff. It's an interesting rifle system, and yet it was too complicated for production. If you take a look at the pistol grip on it, it's at the wrong angle. You can see the entire thing's in a complete afterthought. It was going nowhere. But in the end, after the Russians tinkered with all these different crazy cool weapon systems we've seen over the years that have shown up in Call of Duty, the video game, they went back to the AK-12, which is just an AK with rails. For the most part.
Real top cover, different looking gas block, a different
Yeah.
muzzle device. I mean,
But it's an
whatever.
AK
You know
at
what I'm
heart.
saying? Like,
It's a 5.45 AK at heart.
right. And so, it's just like the only way that I've seen is the modernization of the AK is like the Bren 2 and 7.62x39.
But that's not an AK. That's a modernization of a weapon designed to fire the 7.62x39.
It's not an AK. The Bren 2 is not an AK. But I'm saying to modernize the AK, you essentially have
Ditch
to
the
delete the AK.
Well, arguably that same argument could be made for modernizing the United States service weapon. though.
Actually, I
I mean,
take that
it's a
back.
big budget, it's a big cost, it's a big undertaking. We here in the States, when we talk about rearming our Army or our Marines or our entire military with a new service rifle, I suspect that's a whole different group of hurdles to surmount than what you would find in Mother Russia when they're talking about rearming the entirety of their force. I think that
They don't have the money, man. They just
budgets
don't.
and priorities
They're
and
broke.
sizes of banks to spend it on it's just two different worlds altogether, which is reflected in their fighting weapons.
Yeah. I mean, apparently, I think the core problem with Russia is their printing presses aren't nearly as efficient as ours, because we can print money much faster than they can. Therefore, we can afford to adopt M5 service weapons and things like that, because it has so much less to do with the economy and what your actual gross national product is. It's just how fast that printing press can run. So, whatever, $1.2 trillion, $5 trillion for COVID aid. And, oh, by the way, let's spend another $1 trillion adopting a new weapon system. Why not? We got plenty of money. The press is spitting it out every day,
Now, let me ask you, though, do you think if Russia were spending their budget and they had the budget like we did to rearm our soldiers, do you think that they would come off the AK, or do you think they'd
have to? But keep in mind, the Russians, if you take a look holistically at the Russian military as a whole, all of their weapon systems are horribly outdated or outright fake.
Yes.
I'm not kidding you. There's pictures coming out of Ukraine where Ukrainian soldiers have ripped the reactive armor plates off their T-72 tanks, and it's like eggshell material in there, like egg carton material in there. They don't even have real reactive armor on their tanks. They don't have real body armor. They're showing their body armor, and it's nothing. It can be pulled apart by hand. It's not Kevlar. Like the Russians don't have money. They're putting the T-90 tanks out there right now because they've just committed to taking Ukraine. They didn't expect the resistance they've had. The T-90 is their most current, which is from the 90s, tank that they have in any numbers. They have the new Armada, whatever, T-14 tank, which they have like 10 of. But the T-90 they have a couple hundred of, and they're starting to push those into service in Ukraine because they're trying to, win the war that they can't seem to win. And they're still getting their turrets popped by Javelin missiles, because it's no different than the T-72 in the fact that it's using an autocannon that stores the ammunition around the ring of the turret. And as soon as you hit it in the turret with the Javelin, the whole crew dies. It pops the turret right off the tank. That they don't have the money to actually update their military. So they're using Cold War tech that even in the Cold War was World War II tech. I mean, look at it. The AK-47, the AK-74 is World War II tech.
Which is hilarious, because on a retail shelf, to get into a decent AK, you're spending at least $1,200, $1,500.
That has changed. 20 years ago, it was the opposite.
Yeah. Whereas you can walk into the same gun shop and pick up a Smith & Wesson M&P 15 for
that's just changed.
$750.
That's 57, yeah.
And to me, it's twice the weapon system for half the cost.
Go back 20 years and you could buy AKs for half the price of the good AR-15.
Sure.
So that's just economies, because the AK is, for whatever reason, in incredible demand here in the United States.
And I don't get it.
The number of imports are it's supply and demand. So when you don't have enough supply, the price goes up, right? So
I just don't get the demand.
I get it, because I think everybody that likes, like, if you like the AR-15, you like shooting, you really should own an AK.
Oh,
they're tons of fun to shoot.
That's what I was going to say. Like, if
just
you're
learn
a person that enjoys to shoot, and I highly recommend that, right? If you can and you want to, pick up an AK and actually, like you said, learn it, take it apart, put it back together, shoot it, enjoy it at the range. Like, they are fun weapons to shoot. You know what I mean? It's a cool gun to shoot. And I do have to rewind back. A modernization of the AK would be like the XCR or something of that nature, because it's very AK like ish, if you will. But
I think for Joe and Nancy America, though, who have it in their budget, if they decide that we are going to have a rifle in our home, and they cut out some of their budget, their personal budget, to pick up one rifle for the home, are you going to spend it on a fun one that you should learn how to know how to shoot, or are you going to go straight to the very modular, very easy to use, very easily built?
Well, I'm going straight for that.
For the AR, yeah. Right. So same with me. Like, I'm super utilitarian in my gun ownership. I have, a pistol, all, for every adult in the house, every fighting aged adult in the house. They are chambered in the same caliber. And I have a rifle that takes the same ammo, the same magazine for every fighting age adult in the house. Beyond that, I don't have budget, space, capacity, time to shoot something that's historically cool like an AK. To me, the relevance is it dies on the showroom wall. Mm-hmm. It dies on the library wall. It has, as a shooter with very, very limited time and resources, I'm not interested in the slightest. I like shooting other people's AKs. You know what I mean?
Here's a question for you. So you guys work the floor at Copper.
Yeah.
What would you say the sales numbers are, AK versus AR? How many ARs go out the door versus AKs?
It's not even close. It's not. I'd say
100 to 1, 10 to 1.
I'd say tenfold the sales on ARs versus AKs.
And the type of people looking
number on it, like 20 ARs to one AK.
You think so? That high?
And the type of people looking at the AK, are they collectors? Do you talk to them? Are they people looking for their first rifle? Are they collectors and just adding one to the collection, or do you even know?
It's been a long time since I've sold an AK to a new rifle owner. Typically, the AK customers I get are, guys that are bored with the AR rifle, because I mean,
totally get that.
They are simple to the point of boredom sometimes.
Absolutely.
Like you can exhaust the excitement factor on those fairly quick because they're straightforward to the point.
Boringly reliable,
Yes.
boringly accurate.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Whereas, so typically when you get guys meandering over to the AK wall, it's like, I got a couple ARs, been thinking about changing it up a little bit, want to try an AK. I would say a third to half of those customers, if they, forgive the pun, pull the trigger on an AK, that gun comes back.
So, okay, so let's rewind back to COVID and the panics. We had a lot of first-time gun buyers coming in. A lot of first-time gun buyers are influenced by media, right? They're influenced by movies. They're influenced by YouTube videos. They're influenced by any number of things. And so I think if you gathered up 100 people and asked them, if you know anything about firearms, which would you say is the most reliable military rifle, AK or M16? I think most people would say the AK is the most reliable weapon. With that being said, and I don't believe that's true. I mean, I honestly don't. I don't think the AK is any more reliable than the M16.
Stuff, like that's the
I've literally poured
Hollywood
handfuls of
logic to
dirt.
it, right?
Yeah, I've literally poured handfuls of dirt into an AR-15 on video and showed the thing still worked.
Oh yeah.
So, so the reliability thing, though, is something that people honestly believe. They honestly believe the AK is vastly more reliable than the M16. Did we see that during COVID with a lot of the first-time gun buyers coming in thinking they're going to have to defend their homes? Were people gravitating towards AKs more than ARs then, or was it still about the same?
I'm going to tell you on a personal level, we were like out of ARs and the AK wall was full.
Yeah, I think the first initial push, especially, after the rioting across the country following the George Floyd thing, the AR rack just cleaned out. It looked like the toilet paper aisle there for a minute. And then when those were exhausted, people would start gravitating towards the AKs. But there was, the market around here, in Indiana, there was a lot more explaining from a sales perspective about how to manipulate an AK and what the differences were. I noticed that most people came in, they understood the gist of an AR because you can watch a 5-minute YouTube video that shows you how to check it's clear, how to check it's safe. Which is not to say that you can't on an AK, but I think that there was much more recognition, wouldn't you say?
People would
come in and
gravitate
see
to the AR.
They would see the racks of the ARs, and it was, I'll take this one, and some of them would take two, and only once the AR supply was exhausted on that initial push did we see a real spike in the AK stuff.
But even then, they're like, could you just take my name and number down and give me a call when you get an AR? You know what I mean? So the AK was definitely not as popular during all that spike.
And I mean, even the transfers the FFL transfers into the shop. I mean, Palmetto State Armory was busy.
Yeah,
they were.
But how about their
busy.
AKs though? I see their AKs coming to the shop on transfer.
Actually, we transferred one this morning, and it's sharp, real sharp.
Oh yeah, they're doing a good job.
But M-Lock 4 on it. It looked very modern, very well put together.
Palmetto is actually trying, and I noticed this when it came out of the box. They had a suppressor mount on it because they had chopped the barrel on it or something, and then obviously concentric threads. Another thing the AK lacks is concentric threads.
Some fitment required.
Yeah, some fitment required.
Wolverine suppressor.
I'm limited to one. Outstanding. One suppressor, right? So, but it seems like they had, done something to the barrel, maybe concentric threads. They had like a silencer co-ASR mount or something, 3 port break timed on there. They had this rail system on there, M-Lock rail system. Kind of looked like the RS.
Adjustable buttstock.
RS Regulate, and they had an M4 buttstock on the thing. It actually looked, tactical from the factory. There you go. Now you're starting to have a company actually take from the factory and build this thing, which would then push people more to buy the thing because they don't have to do it. Because I think during the COVID pandemic, the reason people strayed away from it was because, well, how do I mount a light to this thing? Well,
you got to clamp it to the barrel.
Some modification required. You get this rail here, and Dremel this piece off and maybe tighten this. And they're like, I don't want to do that. There was no real provisions to mount easily stuff to it that they would need, because most people that came in to buy a gun wanted a light and a red dot on it.
Because they had already done their homework about what's a good rifle for my wife and I to have in the home, and what are good upgrades for it. So they would come in with having done some homework, like, I want to put a red dot sight on it because I've got an aging prescription in my glasses, and I want a light on it because we live on a few acres, and we get coyotes, or if we want to see the back of the property.
Sling mounting.
So they came in, especially during the pandemic, already kind of knowing like how they wanted to outfit the gun before they had the gun, and the choice to that rifle was because of the outfitting that they wanted to do, the accessories, the capabilities that they wanted to add to it. So they were already thinking, before they ever purchased the firearm, this is how I want to outfit it. And when we would ask them about AKs, it's like, I don't know anything about AKs, because all of the research and the learning that they've done were catered to how they envision themselves using.
So you mentioned something earlier about the Palmetto State Armory AK coming in with different barrel, concentric threads, suppressor, mountable, whatever, rails, and an AR-15 stock tube on it or something, right?
Yeah, very mimicking of the AR-15.
That's what I was getting to. It's like people are trying to turn AKs into ARs. Yep. And there's one thing that I cannot stand are rifles like the ARAC. You remember that thing that...
the AR-AK?
Yeah, the AR-AK.
The CMMG Mutant did it too.
No, the Mutant's different. The Mutant's just an AR-15 that takes AK mags. I mean, the Mutant makes sense.
Okay.
Right? But this thing was some hodgepodge marriage of AK and AR, and I've never understood that desire. Why would you want to take two totally different weapon systems and then put them together, basically an AK bolt and carrier with AR-15,
T-handle even or something? I remember
I've seen those.
At SHOT Show. It was like a T-handle. And you were like, wow, way to
that was at the
combine
Arsenal.
The two worst things.
I know, it's like AK, it's like, perfect. That's like the grip safety on the 1911. Nobody wants it. Put a T-handle charging handle on an AK. Great idea.
Well, to me,
that went nowhere fast.
That's no different than trying to cram a piston into an AR platform, though.
I agree. I mean, I've always been a DI guy.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of AK parts and ARs anymore. I am a fan of AR parts.
But that's the other thing, too, is with the AK. Most of the bores on them and threads are not concentric. You know what I mean? There's no... You have the barrel is a certain diameter, and you get either half 28 or 14x1 left hand. I don't even think you can really thread to 9/16 because you're not going to have a shoulder to work with. You'd have to have it, that your muzzle device come off the crown or something of the barrel. You know what I mean? And so the crowns are offset because the way they thread them, and there's like a thread that's sticking up just a little bit on there, and it kicks the muzzle device over, and you'll get baffle strikes and things like that. Sure, the PBS or the Wolverine suppressor. Wow, now I'm down to one suppressor choice essentially for the AK. Unless I pay a smith to chop the barrel, rethread it, whatever it may be, and actually make the
at that point just rebarrel it.
Right.
Because here's one thing I wanted to say, because how many AKs have we fired? I mean, we fired hundreds of AKs. And one thing that has always annoyed me about the AK is it's just luck of the draw. Whether you're going to get one with straight sights and whether or not you're going to get one with a good barrel in it. Because I've had AKs, I don't care what ammo we put in it, it was lucky to keep a group on a man-sized target at 100 yards.
Yep.
And then I've had AKs that'll shoot 2.5-inch groups with, a specific flavor of ammunition, right? So it seems like the barrel quality, I know the barrel quality is all over the place from these COM-block countries that are still cranking them out, especially when you start talking about budget guns like the Romanian rifles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You either get a great one or you get one that just slings lead everywhere. But I've even seen that with the Bulgarian AKs. I've had Bulgarian AKs I couldn't zero because the sights were so canted, and I've had Bulgarian AKs that just slung lead everywhere, and then other ones that shoot lights out.
Right.
So you just don't know. But if you get one that's slinging lead everywhere, it's not just a matter of buying a Magpul wrench, going home and cranking it off, putting on a proof barrel and screwing it on yourself, and 5 minutes later your gun's shooting sub-minute groups. That's never going to happen with the AK.
You went after that. As a matter of fact, we did a video about a gun where you were trying to create a precision AK.
And I went to great lengths. Me and Blaine over at Atlantic Firearms went to great lengths with the straightjacket barrel system and everything else, trying to eke out the most accuracy we could out of an AK-74. Completely fruitless endeavor.
Yeah. I think the guns are just 2-3 inches, which are whatever. It's fine. That's combat accurate. It's combat
more than
firearm.
Enough. Right.
Fine.
A rack grade M4 is going to do the exact same thing.
Exactly. But I just think the AR-15 M16 is inherently more accurate than any AK that's out there. It's inherently easier to work on. It's inherently easier to accessorize. It is just the better rifle. It's faster to reload. It is better to suppress. It is better for everything.
It's made of higher quality components.
Yeah.
You know, you have machined aluminum versus stamped sheet metal. You're not dealing with rivets. You're not dealing with any of the stuff that the AKs. The AK really is, I think its biggest drawback is the gun really had no foresight in terms of its overall design. It was designed to be as is because, you know, the team, it wasn't Kalashnikov. Everybody credits him. That's just Soviet propaganda as being the guy that, you know, the poor farmer, tank driver from World War I or whatever that developed this great weapon system that the motherland. It was a group of people, and there were multiple groups working on multiple things, and it was just his team that won the contract. But I just don't think that they were thinking much past wood grips and iron sights when they put the weapon together, because here in 2020, if you take a look at the AK-74s that I'm seeing being used by Russian troops, you know, National Guard troops and low-end troops, the people they threw into the meat grinder early on in the Ukraine war, they're running around with iron sights. And in my opinion, when you have iron sights and that's it, that's all you have on your weapon system, that just gives them a reason to spray and pray. Because in low light, inclement weather, anything that makes it less than ideal, makes it hard for those. Right. Anything that makes it hard to acquire a sight picture, which is a lot of things when you're using iron sights. That's my generation. I love red dots and magnified optics now. But iron sights, I still practice with them, proficient with them, enjoy shooting them because of the challenge. But if anything changes environmentally, they're very difficult to use proficiently, especially with poorly trained troops, which leads to mag dumps and spraying lead, which means you don't get hits. And so the Russian army, as it currently stands, Estonia could kick their butts. I mean, it's just they have the weapon systems and the Western training that even though they're outnumbered 100 to 1 or worse, it's just they have superior weapon systems. The infantry soldier itself is vastly better equipped than the average Russian soldier is.
Right. So that's just my beef with that. You know, some modification required of the AK.
I'm sure somebody out there is going to say, "Oh no, there's this Russian group, there's this particular battalion that has, you know,
there was KUSA or something,
lightsabers and ray guns."
The AK many years ago at a SHOT Show is like this polymer, you know, chassis, if you will, of an AK in there, and to me, that would be the modernization of it, right? You can keep the operating system, you just have to change
everything else.
Pretty much everything else.
I mean, I think in 2022, if you're going to have a reliable, consistent, and that's the key here is consistency. If you're going to have a consistent AK, you almost need to go to a shop that specializes in them. Somebody like Definitive, you know.
Right.
Now, that's my big footnote here. If I could get my hands on an AK that said Definitive Arms on it, that's a whole different story altogether. Because those are not mass-produced weapons. Those are hand-built, every single one. So
they're going to shoot. The sights are going to be zeroable.
You're going to have a much larger degree of consistency there, and you're not going to run into the hiccups that you run into with mass production or just
comm block production,
right?
Which is just, I mean, literally, it's all over the place.
Either of which they are not.
Russian AKs all over the place in terms of fitment, just the magazines they can use. Literally, when you buy an AK, there's so many different magazines out there.
Exactly.
I mean, I've had Russian-made AKs I couldn't get Bakelite magazines into. I'd have to put them in and out, and it would like literally shaving the Bakelite off the magazine until it fit.
Right.
You know, and there's certain AKs out there that won't take, you know, Hugo mags or Chinese mags or Eastern European or Korean mags. I mean, you just have this whole, you know, smorgasbord of magazines out there, and some are going to work and some aren't.
Right.
And when they don't work at all. I mean, it really causes the gun problems.
And then who do you go to remedy the problem? Do you go to the manufacturer of the gun? Do you go to the manufacturer of the magazine? Who's out of spec? You know what I'm saying? Like, where is the inconsistency?
Well, there is no standard spec. That's just it.
That's what I'm saying.
Every comm block country kind of sort of followed the Soviet pattern.
They're there-ish.
Right.
Ish.
They could use the same ammunition, and they could pretty much use the same magazine, you know. But you take a look at the Yugos, they didn't chrome line their barrels. Their handguards didn't swap back and forth with the Russian guns. I mean, you know, they made a completely different rifle. It was the same rifle, same concept, same operating system, but there was no parts interchangeability with the Russians. But then again, the Yugoslavians were kind of riding the fence during the Cold War. They weren't really part of the Soviet Union.
In 2022 with ammo import bans and all this other stuff, and now folks are really turning to look at the 223.556 AK, you know, and things of that nature. But again, those that are using the AK have just stuck with that thing, and they're like, this is the greatest weapon ever. It's just like Glock owners. It's the best. Nothing beats the Glock.
Wait, what?
It's the whatever, you know.
Man, just get a Glock.
At least it didn't say 1911.
M&P. But you know,
Oh yeah, the guns that for like 5 years had lockup issues.
So is this
Whatever,
we're about to
whatever.
get
I'm
on
just
Fords
totally-
and Chevys,
totally
and
messing
Jeeps
around.
and Toyotas?
I'm
What's
totally
next?
messing around, dude. You get whatever gun works for you. But again,
Right.
the AK
Whatever you
is
make
an
good hits with.
absolutely sexy weapon. It is a fun weapon to shoot. You know, but in today's time, it's funny to see that like Palmetto State Armory is the only one that's like modernizing the AK to what?
Make it more like an
looking
AR-15
standard. So
Right.
anyway, that's kind of the gist of it, you know. So
Well, I mean, that's a fun, spirited conversation, and like we've pretty much all said here today, there's nothing wrong with the AK in terms of, you know, a civilian rifle. It's definitely a fun rifle to own. I would definitely, you couldn't pry my, you know, Chinese AKs out of my hands, my Bulgarians. I mean, my East German Definitive Arms made rifle. I mean, I
They're
love
just
the rifles.
beautiful guns.
They're fun to shoot, beautiful rifles. It's just, I don't think that they're at the same level that the M4 is, right? So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed
Never
the
will be.
conversation. I definitely look forward to the comments down below. That should be interesting. And yeah, so anyway, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people out there hitting that dislike button, but YouTube's changed that functionality and they don't show the
I don't
dislike
know
number
why-
anymore.
There's no reason to really dislike it. You know,
I
what
miss
mean?
the
like,
dislike
in all
button.
honesty, like
If you're not-
if you like the AK, that's
Rock
great.
it.
Rock
Run
it.
it.
Do whatever you want.
Do
to
you
do.
do you.
You do you.
You do you.
Exactly.
Guys, thank you for watching for 14 years. If you would like to support us here at the Military Arms Channel, the best possible way to do that is to become part of our Patreon family. Link in the video description below. Right here on YouTube, got the little join button underneath the video player you're watching right now. Mash that join button and you can support us here in the age of demonetization. Last but not least, swing by, check out coppercustom.com. Thank you for, again, 14 years of support. We'll talk to you guys soon.